Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Shri Radhe. Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadramai. Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhay Charanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This morning we are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 5, Vidura's Talks with Maitreya. Text number 12. Please repeat. Munir Vivakshur Bhagavad Gunanam. Munir Vivakshur Bhagavad Gunanam. Sakhapite Bharatamaha Krishna. Sakhapite Bharatamaha Krishna. Yasmin Nrinam Gramya Sukhanuvadir. Yasmin Nrinam Gramya Sukhanuvadir. Sakhapite Bharatamaha Krishna. Yasmin Nrinam Gramya Sukhanuvadir. Kathayam. Munir Vivikshur Bhagavad Gunanam. Sakhapite Bharatam Grihita Nuhare Kathayam. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Your friend, the great sage Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa, has already described the transcendental qualities of the Lord in his great work, the Mahabharata. But the whole idea is to draw the attention of the mass of people to Krishna Katha, Bhagavad Gita, through their strong affinity for hearing mundane topics. Purport. The great sage Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa is the author of all Vedic literature, of which his works Vedanta Sutra, Srimad Bhagavatam and Mahabharata are very popular readings, as stated in Bhagavatam 1.4.25. Srila Vyasadeva compiled the Mahabharata for the less intelligent class of men who take more interest in mundane topics than in the philosophy of life. The Vedanta Sutra was compiled for persons already above the mundane topics, who might already have tasted the bitterness of the so-called happiness of mundane affairs. The first aphorism of Vedanta Sutra is Atato Brahma Jigyasa. That is, only when one has finished the business of mundane inquiries in the marketplace of sense gratification can one make relevant inquiries regarding Brahman, the transcendence. Those persons who are busy with the mundane inquiries which fill the newspapers and other literatures are classified as Stri Shudra Dvijabandhus, or women, the laborer class, and unworthy sons of the higher classes, Brahmana, Kshatriya, and Vaishya. Such less intelligent men cannot understand the purpose of a Vedanta Sutra, although they make a show of studying the sutras in a perverted way. The real purpose of Vedanta Sutra is explained by the author himself in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And anyone trying to understand Vedanta Sutra without reference to Srimad Bhagavatam is certainly misguided. Such misguided persons who are interested in the mundane affairs of philanthropic and altruistic work under the misconception of the body as the self could better take advantage of the Mahabharata, which was specifically compiled by Srila Vyasadeva for their benefit. The great author has compiled the Mahabharata in such a way that the less intelligent class of men who are more interested in mundane topics may read the Mahabharata with great relish, and in the course of such mundane happiness can also take advantage of Bhagavad Gita, the preliminary study of Srimad Bhagavatam or the Vedanta Sutra. Srila Vyasadeva has no interest in writing a history of mundane activities other than to give less intelligent persons a chance for transcendental realization through Bhagavad Gita. Vidura's reference to the Mahabharata indicates that he has heard of the Mahabharata from Vyasadeva, his real father, while he was away from home and was touring the places of pilgrimage. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Stadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vansha Kalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So yesterday was apparently the coldest day in the last 25 years, I heard. And then someone else told me that it was the coldest day since 1899, which I don't know how true that is, but certainly, at least in the last 25 years, was the coldest day. And it reminded me of what Srila Prabhupada mentions in his purports, that I think it's in the purport for Matra Sparsha Stukonteya 2.14, where he says that even in the coldest winter, the yogi will still take a bath in a freezing river. And in the hottest summer, the housewife will still be in the kitchen cooking up food for the family. So in the same way, we see devotees here, all rugged up with beanies and jackets. So it's very nice that you've come here to listen to Srimad Bhagavatam. I pray that I can say something. My voice is not so good, so I hope it doesn't fail me. So Vidura has just finished talking to Uddhava, and that was on the banks of the Ganges. And Uddhava, as you all know, has now left. He's gone to Badrikashram to be with Naranara Rishi, to continue his devotional service there, to perfect his life and then go back to the spiritual world. Uddhava is a eternal resident of Dwarka in the spiritual world, so he's pursuing Krishna in that way. And then he advises Vidura to go and speak to Maitreya Rishi. So it's explained in the Bhagavatam that Vidura keeps walking along the Ganges, and eventually he comes to a little hermitage, and that's where Maitreya Muni is situated, close to the Yamuna actually. And you might get a little stumped, because for so long, for 2 entire chapters, Vidura and Uddhava were conversing very intimately about Krishna's pastimes, right? We had the chapter where Uddhava was talking about Krishna's pastimes inside Vrindavan. So practically the first 40 chapters of the 10th canto, Uddhava, he spoke his own Krishna book. Right? In that one chapter he spoke his own Krishna book. All the important things that he remembered, because of course, remember, he visited Vrindavan. And when Uddhava visited Vrindavan, he used to walk around with all the Brajabasis through different areas of Vrindavan, and he used to point to different places of Leela, like Govardhan Hill, Yamuna, different groves and different bowers. And as Uddhava would point to different places, all the residents of Vrindavan, specifically the gopis, they would become very emotional, and they would start to just speak from their mouth, known as Adrita. Adrita is someone who is very much qualified because of their eagerness to hear about Krishna. So this is Vidura's qualification, that he's Adrita. So having said that, having had this qualification in his conversations with Uddhava, one might think that when he naturally meets Maitreya Muni, that he would continue speaking about Krishna's pastimes. So please tell me more about Krishna. So what did Krishna do in Vrindavan? What did Krishna do in Dwarka? But we have something somewhat of a conundrum. Does anyone know what Vidura questions Maitreya Muni about when he meets him? Do you remember? This is actually explained in the latter half of this chapter. He actually starts to talk about the material world. Please tell me about how the material world is working, how the different elements are created, how the demigods are administrating the material universe, how all this sort of stuff is happening. And if we don't understand Krishna consciousness properly, then yanatma suprasidati. So Shukadeva Goswami glorifies the sages, or is it Sutta Goswami? Sutta Goswami, right? He glorifies these sages at Naimisharanya, that you're asking just very right questions, because the mass of people in this material world, they're covered up with the material body, the false ego, and they're considering that their body, their possessions, and everything that they're doing, their designations, all their upadhis, are very important and pertaining to them. Therefore, they can't understand the spiritual reality very easily. The way that they can begin to understand the transcendental reality is first by understanding the nature of this material world. And the key thing here is to understand that this material energy is actually not separate from Krishna, but it is connected to Krishna. That is the difference in the vision between a devotee and, as Prabhupada mentions in the Bhagavatam, a separatist. A separatist is someone who separates Krishna and Krishna's energy. Krishna is separate. He may be there, he may be existing somewhere in the spiritual world performing his lila, but here I am in the material world, and this material world is completely different and separate from Krishna, and therefore because I'm in this material world, let me enjoy in this material world, and Krishna can enjoy in the spiritual world. This is the vision of a separatist. But when Lord Brahma is revealing the Chatur Shloki when Krishna is revealing the Chatur Shloki to Lord Brahma in, I think, the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he explains to him, in the second verse of the Chatur Shloki, he explains to Lord Brahma that if you at any point in time see anything as separate and independent from me, know that to be a creation of Maya. Know that to be a creation of Maya. And this philosophy is perfected in our Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, especially recently, by the Goswamis, like Rupa Goswami. He quotes in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Anasaktasya Vishayan Yatarham Upayunjita Nirbandha Krishna Sambandhe Yukta Vairagyam Uchyate. He says, this material energy is connected to Krishna, and therefore it is to be used in Krishna's service. And then, as Srila Prabhupada would often mention, he would always have a microphone in front of him, and would say, just how we have this microphone, it's material energy, but because we're speaking Krishna Katha into this microphone, it has become spiritualized, it has become Krishnized. So this is the vision of a devotee. This sees everything in relation to in Krishna, everything in connection to Krishna. Another example that can be given is the Chandra Shaka Nyaya. You know that example? Srila Prabhupada mentions that if a mother is trying to show her very young baby the moon, the baby cannot look up into the sky, it doesn't know what it's looking at, it can't see the moon. So the mother says, the branch is nearby. So the mother says, just look between the two branches, because the baby can see the branches. And the baby focuses his or her vision between the two branches, and between the two branches, the baby sees in the distance, sees the moon. So in the same way, we see this tactic played out not only by Vidura here, okay? We see this in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam as well, right? Practically a big chunk of the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam about the material world, right? The different planets, how far they are, who lives on these planets, right? The construct of the Bhumandala, the universe, latitude and longitude wise, right? And then that's in the 5th canto, and this is right now in the 3rd canto. And then if you will recall, at the beginning of the 2nd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam also, Shukadev Goswami starts Srimad Bhagavatam by talking about the Virat Roop, by talking about how materialist persons can begin to appreciate the personal form of the Lord by seeing everything in material nature as Krishna's energy. So obviously, as you know, they see the rivers as the blood or the arteries of Krishna, the trees as the hairs on the body of Krishna, etc. The sun and the moon, Yat Chakshur Esha Savita Sakala Grahanam. Chakshu. So the sun is said to be the eye of the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada mentions the sun and the moon is like the eye of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in this way, because we're dealing with the material energy, we can begin to appreciate Krishna, who is completely separate and independent from the material energy. We can begin to understand Krishna through the material energy, through his material energy. And the same tactic is used by Krishna also in the Bhagavad Gita. We see in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita and in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is describing his opulences, right? Of all immovable objects, what is Krishna? Do you know, Prabhu? Yeah. Which mountain? Himalaya. Right? Of all aquatics, Krishna is the shark. Right? Of all sound vibrations, pranava sarva vedeshu. Right? He says, I am that sound vibration, the original sound vibration, Om. So Krishna is saying that there's so many opulences in this material world. Right? Of vast bodies of water, Krishna explains he is the ocean. All these are material examples, right? But we can begin to appreciate Krishna by seeing Krishna through the material energy. And Ishopanishad also explains that we should cultivate knowledge of Krishna's spiritual qualities, pastimes, and at the same time we should cultivate knowledge of how detestable and temporary and failing the material energy is as well. So side by side, Ishopanishad says, we should cultivate knowledge of the transcendental reality, and at the same time we should cultivate knowledge about the temporary nature of the material reality, or I don't know if you can call it the reality. It is real, Prabhupada says, it is real, but it's temporary. Right? That's our achintya bheda bheda look on things, like that. So that's why Vidura is inquiring to Krishna, to Maitreya, about the material energy. I was on book distribution, I think last week sometime, and I was knocking on several houses, and as you do many times, I was meeting people who were saying, I'm not stressed out, everything's going very nice, everything's going fine, I don't need these books, I'm okay, like that. Fine. Then I crossed the street, because on the other side of the street I saw two Chinese men, young men, just standing beside their car. They were like painters or something like that. They had just finished painting a house, and they had all their painting cans and ladders and stuff with them. And they were just standing next to the car, and they were just talking with each other. And then I ran across the street, and I ran up to them and said, hey, please take this book. It'll teach you how to get free from stress, like that. And then all of a sudden, I'm seeing that they're actually not peaceful and happy. They're actually very frustrated, angry, and upset. Because then I realized, because they were conversing in their language, I couldn't understand. Then I realized that they were actually angry because their car was parked on the side of the road. And while they were painting, some other car had come. It was a narrow street. Some other car had come and smashed the back of their car. So their whole, so the number plate area and one side of the rear light was completely smashed. And they had done a hit and run. So they smashed it, and then they didn't leave any details or anything behind. They just drove away. So this person had no clue who did it. So it's much harder to, for the insurance and all that sort of stuff. So they're actually very upset. And even in this condition, where one is supposed to take the solution, they also said no. So whether one is peaceful in mature life or one is troubled in mature life, the nature of Maya is that we think that we don't need Krishna consciousness. My Guru Maharaj explains that in Maya's domain, there's no education department. So no matter how many years, lifetimes you spend in the material world, life after life in different species of life, Maya will not educate you that you should be going for something higher. You may sometimes get frustrated of material enjoyment. Like that's explained, bhoga tyaga. So you'll renounce the material enjoyment, and then you'll try to be detached, right? Let me give up partying, let me give up meat eating, all these things, let me give up. But unless one gets the taste of Krishna consciousness, which is only gotten by the mercy of a devotee, okay? Then because the nature of the soul is anandamaya abhyasat, the soul is looking for happiness. So if you stay away from material happiness without tasting spiritual happiness, then it's just a matter of time where you'll go back to material enjoyment again. Aruya krichyana param padam tata patanti nadata yushmat angraya. Prabhupada mentions that the jnanis who are developing knowledge, they go all the way up to Brahman and they just exist there in Sat. There's no Chit, there's no Ananda. There's no knowledge of their eternal position in relationship with Krishna, that they're Krishna and Nityadas. There's no Ananda, there's no positive Ananda. There's no positive Ananda in the sense that there's no bliss that one gets from rendering service to Krishna. engaged in Krishna service, that Ananda is not there. The only Ananda which is there in Brahman is the Ananda like this, that if it's a very hot day, or let's say it's a very cold day, today is a very cold day, and you're struggling on the streets for the whole day, for some reason you're out there on the streets for the whole day, and then you find a building, and then you run into the building, and as you open the door, you close the door behind you, the AC is on. Maybe you go into a library or something like that, and the AC is on, and it's very nice, it's very hot, 27, 28 degrees, right? Then you feel happiness, right? You'll feel happiness. But that happiness is short-lived, because just after 5-6 minutes, and in fact, because you were wearing jackets and beanies and stuff like that, you'll start to even take them off, because now you'll start to think, hey, it's too hot now. So material enjoyment is like that. You'll go for something because you think it's happiness, you'll enjoy it, but then that very thing will become stale, banal, trite, and then you'll give that up and you'll go for something else. And same thing will happen. And you'll spend your whole lifetime, and not just lifetime, but lifetime after lifetime in different species, trying to search for that rasa, which is originally the happiness that you're trying to look for in relationship with Krishna. So therefore, as Srila Prabhupada is mentioning here in the purport today, that is why Vyasadeva has compiled great itihasas like Ramayana and Mahabharata. Itihasa means, does anyone know what itihasa means? Yeah, history. Itihasa means history. So Vedic knowledge, and not just Vedic knowledge, but Vedanta, the ultimate Vedesha Sarver Ahameva Vedya. Right? Krishna says 15:15, out of all the Vedas, I am to be known. So that Guya, that most secret of knowledge, most confidential knowledge, Vyasadeva has put that in, as Srila Prabhupada is mentioning, very relishable histories, where people can fulfill their propensities of mystery, intrigue, action, politics, all that sort of stuff. They can fulfill their hankering and attraction for these things, and at the same time they can understand the most essential message of Krishna consciousness. I was thinking about this, that if you're trying to give someone medicine, like if you're a parent and you're trying to give your young child some medicine, then I don't know if you've seen, but I've seen sometimes the parents will put the medicine on a spoon, and instead of feeding the child directly, they'll pretend it's like an airplane or something like that. The spoon is like some airplane, and they'll make some noises, and then they'll put it into the child's mouth, and the child will get distracted. Right? You've seen something like that before? Yeah. So the itihasas, which Vyasadeva has written, is also the same thing, because people don't want to digest the knowledge, like the knowledge which is there in Ishopanishad is, and Bhagavad Gita, right? Aham sarvasya prabhu, bow down to me, worship me, surrender to me, chant my glories. It's very direct. For someone who thinks that Krishna is away by himself somewhere in the spiritual world enjoying, and I'm here in a mature world, and sees no relationship with him and Krishna, this sort of preaching is very direct, and it's very not attractive perhaps for a conditioned soul. So therefore, the itihasas are just like that medicine which is being fed to the conditioned soul in a very distractive fashion. Right? Another example is that if a parent wants to feed the medicine to the child, then sometimes they'll put the medicine, they'll put the tablet inside the food. Right? The tablet is there and they'll cover it with some food. And then the baby will think that, look, I'm getting some nice sweet or something, but in fact the baby eats the medicine as well. So again, itihasas is the same thing. Bhagavad Gita or Mahabharata is the same thing. You're thinking that you're getting some epic intrigue between two families and stuff like that, and all that sort of stuff. So, but then Prabhupada is mentioning the whole idea is to draw the attention of the mass of people to Krishna Katha, and in brackets he's got Bhagavad Gita. Now, Mahabharata has 100,000 verses in Sanskrit, and the essence, the medicine of that is the Bhagavad Gita. So the whole, you could say the medicine is the 700 verses. And that 700 verses, which is the medicine, is covered up with 100,000 verses of the Itihasa, which is Mahabharata. Right? So this is Krishna's very expert tactic of giving us the medicine. Just look how much sweetness Krishna has to cover up the medicine. Actually, the medicine is actually really sweet. Bhagavad Gita is most sweet. But he has to cover the 700 verses, Vyasadeva, with 100,000 verses of what we think is sweet. Just so that we can take the 700 verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Right? So that's the second example. The third example is that if a parent wants to give their child maybe not a medicine, but maybe like let's say vegetables or something, because the child is averse to eating vegetables like peas and stuff like that. They just want to eat cheese and lollies and all that sort of stuff. So then the parent will mash up or mix up the vegetables into the food and then give it to the child, and the child will not realize that it has vegetables in it. Right? So in the same way, you can read the entire Mahabharata, you can read the entire Ramayana, and all throughout it, Krishna will be coming up at all times. Right? Krishna, which is the essence of why you're studying the Vedas, Krishna will be coming up. So in the same way, you're eating, each bite you're eating, and the vegetables are there in each bite. So in the same way, each chapter that you read, each kanda that you read of the Itihasas, Krishna will be there, Krishna Lila will be there. And Srila Prabhupada explains that the success, for example, in these books, in these transcendental literatures, is not by how grammatically correct they're written or how aesthetic they are, how aesthetic the language is, but how often the word Krishna comes on each one of the pages. And that's why Prabhupada says that even if someone reads just one page, right, they're still reading. They may not understand, but they're still getting the medicine, which is Krishna and his holy name. So I was just recently reading a very nice pastime. It just comes to my mind because I just finished reading it about Krishna's pastime in Dwarka. So Krishna, this is outside of Vrindavan, and Krishna, in Dwarka, does anyone know how many palaces were there in Dwarka? Anyone know? It's explained, the Acharyas explained that there were 900,000 palaces on that island of Dwarka. Right? And they were scattered all throughout the island, but Krishna had a very special section of Dwarka, which was just for him. It was just accessible to Krishna, his family members, the Yadus. And no one else had, easy access to that part. And this part of Dwarka, out of the 900,000 palaces which were there, this part had the 16,108 palaces which belonged to Krishna's queens. So it's explained really nicely in Srimad Bhagavatam that Krishna would arise early in the morning and he would meditate on himself, he would chant the Gayatri mantra, and he would perform yajna, and then he would give charity to the brahmanas, and then he would see auspicious things. Like, for example, he would see ghee, he would see mirror, he would take darshan of the cows and the bulls, because the whole economic system in the Vedas is running on the cows and the bulls. Cow protection, and the bulls which are used to plow the fields so that we can get food, the crops. So Krishna would do all these things, and then Krishna would leave his palace, and we know in Krishna book Prabhupada mentions that Krishna, 16,108 expansions of Krishna would leave their palaces at the same time, and then they would merge together into one Krishna. And that one Krishna would come, and then Daruka would come with his chariot yoked with horses, transcendental horses, and Krishna would be flanked by people singing and with chamar whisks. All these descriptions are given. And then Krishna would enter the Sudharma assembly hall, right? And there'd be people, again, entertainment there, people singing, mridangas would be playing like that, and Krishna would take his seat on the main seat in the assembly hall to see what is the duties that he has to perform for his citizens for the day. And then on one particular day, there happened to be one brahmana who ran into the assembly hall. And he was huffing and puffing, and he had apparently something very important to tell. So the guards let him in, and before Krishna, he revealed something. That Jarasandha, we know Jarasandha, he's the father-in-law of Kamsa. Jarasandha has just captured 20,000 kings from surrounding kingdoms and kept them in prison. Therefore, O Krishna, please send your army forth to kill Jarasandha and to release these kings. And then all the Yadavas, they were like, yes, let's go, let's kill Jarasandha, he's our enemy, because as you know, he had attacked Mathura 17 times in the past. And on the 18th time, we know, Krishna just walked away. And then Jarasandha thought that he had defeated Krishna. Krishna was Ranachor. He was scared of him, Krishna had apparently run away from the battlefield. So he had captured 20,000 kings. So that's one thing. Then, on another hand, as soon as the Brahmana messenger had said this, just out of the blue, Narada Muni, the great celestial sage, he appeared. And it's explained his hair was like golden and effulgent. And he came and then he explained that Yudhishthira Maharaj in Hastinapur wants to conduct the Rajasuya sacrifice, so that he can glorify you, Krishna, and he can gain sovereignship and rulership of the entire world, to establish bhakti, to establish pure devotional service, and to establish your worship throughout the three worlds, throughout at least earth. So please come, Krishna, please come to Hastinapur. So what is to be done in this situation? On the one hand, the messenger is saying, come to kill Jarasandha, because 20,000 kings are imprisoned. And on the other hand, Narada Muni is saying, come to Hastinapur, because your cousin Yudhishthira Maharaj wants to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. So and just one thing about Jarasandha. Jarasandha is explained by the Acharyas, which is actually performing a sacrifice to Mahabhairava. He wanted to, not a very scary form of Lord Shiva. So he wanted to actually perform a sacrifice where he would capture 100,000 kings and then sacrifice them to Mahabhairava, so then he could rule the world like that. So out of the 100,000 kings, he had already captured 20,000 kings in a fortress. So he was well on his way. So then things had to be stopped, right? So then what actually happens is that Krishna asks his devotee Uddhava, the same Uddhava that we are hearing about in this part of Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is something that really bewilders Uddhava, because Uddhava later on is explained, if you read the summary, Subodhini, it's explained there, that Uddhava is thinking, Krishna, even though you're all cognizant, you're aware of everything, still you're coming up to me and asking me for counsel and for guidance about what to do in this situation. Even though you know very well what's going to happen in the future, you know what's happening in the present, you know what's happened in the past. This is the bewildering thing about Krishna. That's why Krishna is playing the perfect role of a human being. And then the story continues that Uddhava, he comes up with the best plan which satisfies everyone. He says that, see, if you go to kill Jarasandha, then Yudhishthira Maharaj might get a bit upset. Right? Yeah, I called you for Rajasuya sacrifice, you didn't come. But if you go to the Rajasuya sacrifice, then Jarasandha would continue his, kidnapping of kings and all that sort of stuff. So what to do? So Uddhava says, so what you should do is, in order to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice, Yudhishthira Maharaj has to gain rulership over the entire world anyway. So therefore he has to conquer all the kings anyway. So what you do is you first go to Hastinapur and meet with your cousins, the Pandavas, and appease them. And then you can take Bhima, because Bhima is equal in strength to Jarasandha. It's said that they both had the strength of 10,000 elephants. And then you can take him to Jarasandha, and you can fulfill the purpose of killing Jarasandha in that way. And that's exactly what happens. So Krishna with his whole retinue, in fact Krishna takes all of his 16,108 queens from Dwarka to Hastinapur. It's a grand procession. It's really nicely explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam there. And he stays there for a couple of months. And then it's explained that Yudhishthira Maharaj, he sends each one of the Pandavas, the remaining 4 brothers, in 4 directions, so that they can conquer the enemies and they can get the wealth, so that they can perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. And that's where Arjuna gets the name Dhananjaya. Dhanan means wealth, Jaya means one who amasses through victorious battle or whatever. So Dhananjaya. So then on one particular day, Krishna, Bhima and Arjuna, they go to the capital of Jarasandha. And Jarasandha is explained, he was very favorable to the Brahmanas. They disguised themselves as Brahmanas, and they went exactly at that time where Jarasandha actually gives charity to the Brahmanas. And Jarasandha, he starts to look at them and he thinks, these people look really familiar. I've seen them somewhere. And the Acharyas explain that Jarasandha had actually seen the 3 of them at Draupadi's Swayamvara. So when Draupadi was getting married, at that time Krishna and, right? So Arjuna was there, Bhima was there as well. But he thinks, looking at their marks, the bowstring marks on their forearm, and looking at the very grave voice, powerful voice that they have, and their bodily features, they're very strong, they're very muscly. These people can't be Brahmanas, they can't be priests. So they must be actually Kshatriyas. So he calls them Kshatriya Bandhus. Okay, they may be Kshatriyas, but they may be some lesser kings, not some powerful kings. So in this way, they actually beg for a fight. And the fight continues, and it actually goes on for 27 days. On the 28th day, Bhima says to Krishna that Jarasandha's strength is equal to mine. There's no way that I can actually defeat him. And it's explained that Jarasandha would give Bhima a gada, right? A mace made of like brass. And they would strike each other's body so hard that the mace itself would break and fall to the ground. That's how powerful these warriors were. So anyway, Krishna gives the hint. Jarasandha had actually been connected together by the witch Jara. So Krishna, on the 28th day, he gets a branch and he rips it in half. So I won't say how Krishna kills him. It's pretty obvious. It's a very horrendous death that Jarasandha goes through. But it was very comforting to know. Someone was saying, I think maybe it was during Nrsimha Chaturdasi, I can't remember, but some devotee is saying in Bhagavatam Cross recently that when Lord Nrsimha was killing Hiranyakshipu by ripping his torso, because Krishna was doing it, because Nrsimha was doing it, it looked like Hiranyakshipu was suffering, but actually he was feeling the greatest ecstasy because he was being touched directly by Krishna. So in the same way, here we see an example which is completely arranged by Krishna. So I don't want to speculate, but it's Krishna's wish. We don't know exactly what Jarasandha felt at that time. But it's Krishna's arrangement. So these sort of stories are very enticing for people who are, materialistic. So, but through that, what do we learn from this one simple story? What do we learn? We learn that Krishna is all-knowing. That's one point. Just things that come to mind. We learn that these 20,000 kings, which were there captured and imprisoned in Jarasandha's fortress, they actually sent a message through this Brahmana who came to Dwarka to inform Krishna, right? Now, Krishna replies back to these kings before he visits Jarasandha in his kingdom. He says, don't worry, I'll be coming. The Acharyas explain that when they hear this, when they get this message from Krishna, they're in such a position that their minds are forced on Krishna now. Just like Rukmini, right? She's in that position where she's going to be married off to Shishupal. And right up to the last minute, she's hoping that Krishna will come and marry her. So in that intense situation, Rukmini's mind is completely focused on Krishna. This situation is arranged by Krishna. In the same way, pride is religion, surrender to me. So in essence, smartavya satatam Vishnu, vismartavya na jatuchit. The essence of all the Vedic literatures is to always remember Krishna and to never forget Krishna. So this is one example that we can see. Just by reading this entertaining story of Jarasandha and how he's killed, we can subconsciously understand Krishna's preeminent position. So in this way we owe a great deal to Srila Vyasadeva for compiling the Itihasas, by which we can have a great appreciation for Krishna, and also, of course, Srila Prabhupada for making these accessible to us in the modern age by his translations and his hard work and dedication. So I'll finish there. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.